Well, what a night last night. What did you watch, the darts or did you watch Arsenal?
Mainly the darts, but I did pay enough attention to the Arsenal game to realise they were not their best. I was disappointed in the Arsenal performance. It just strikes me at the moment they're trying to plod their way to the title, and I think it's a dangerous tactic.
You're not suggesting for 1 minute that the bus stop in Hounslow is where the title journey comes to an end.
Well, listen, it might not be a terrible point come the end of the season because not many teams go to the GTEC and win, but it was more the manner of the Arsenal performance that left me a little bit underwhelmed. They didn't play like champions.
Scott, have you had a good week? It's been a massive week of football, hasn't it?
Do you know what? It's been mental, mate. I was at Spurs on Tuesday, Palace on Wednesday, did Charlton TV yesterday. I'm doing Hull Chelsea today, and then I'm doing Aston Villa Newcastle tomorrow. As well, I'm going to be with you guys. Maybe not in physical form. I'll be with you on Sunday as well.
So that means I've got 3 days of Minto. Because if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to Hull tonight and Aston Villa on Saturday. And I'm going to speak to him on Sunday. Wow, this is great. Right, okay, let's get into the midweek action, starting off at the GTEC Community Stadium, where Arsenal ended up hitting a little bit of a roadblock. What a performance by Brentford. I think the first thing we need to say is how good they were, Scott, because defensively and offensively, but defensively they were brilliant. In the midfield, they were all over Arsenal. They were closing down so superbly. They didn't give them a moment to breathe, and it restricted the number of opportunities that they could create, Arsenal. And I spoke to Mikel Arteta, and he said if he did have a disappointment, it was the fact that they only fashioned 2 chances and weren't unlocking the door. How much of the blame lies at the feet of Eberechi Eze, given a first start after 9 games without one in the Premier League and then hauled off at half-time?
Yeah, look, I think it's a little bit unfair to have a go at him. I like him. I think he's a very talented player, but he's almost the player of moments, whereas Martin Odegaard is someone who can control the tempo of the game. So if you don't get him into the right place, if you're looking to against a team that defends deep, he can unlock defenses. But other times games can pass him by, and so just to come in when you haven't played particularly much in recent games and say, right, you now be the star against what you've just said about a very difficult Brentford side is not easy. Plus, he's trying to still come to terms with Mikel Arteta and his tactics and exactly how he wants him to play from a positional sense, both with and without the ball. I don't want to blame just him. This is Arsenal going to a proper football ground against a proper football team. And if you're going to win this title, you need to find a way to win. And they haven't. And City are breathing down their necks.
Aston Villa, Newcastle, Liverpool, Manchester United, Chelsea have all struggled. Tottenham struggled to win on this ground. It's a difficult place to go. But did Mikel Arteta get his tactics right last night?
No, I don't think he did, because I think it was a not lose the game first mentality, as opposed to try and go and win it and take it by the scruff of the neck. And, they had another shot on target before the goal, had one big chance at the end when Martinelli maybe should have done better. But as I say, when you're in the home straight and you're trying to compete for a title, I think champions find a way to win. If I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be alarmed by their performance.
Do you think it's just one of those things, though? You're not going to win every game. There is no way that you're going to win every game. And between now and the end of the season, they've got enough winnable games to be able to get over the line. And, that he was harassed when I spoke to him afterwards, Mikel Arteta. He actually said, it feels like I've been in a washing machine. And that's because half of it was sort of dealing with Michael Coyote's unbelievable torpedo of a throw-in and the set pieces that just keep bombarding into the box. It's a big thing to concentrate on all night. They conceded 1 out of all of those. And, other teams have conceded a lot more. It is a very difficult place to go. So maybe actually more of the credit needs to lie on the desk of Keith Andrews. I know he's your best mate, but, we probably need to big him up a little bit, Scott.
Can I big him up? Can I say what I said on Game Day Live on Sunday? Take about 30 seconds. The greatest manager in the club's history. You have to say that about Thomas Frank, whatever he's done with Spurs has gone. The 3 best players have gone, 2 main scorers, the 39 league goals between them, plus the captain, who's an absolute leader. So even if an experienced manager came in, then it could have been a tough season. But you can see there's been a change in the training regime. They're fitter than ever before. He's created huge competition for places. He's not afraid to drop big names. He's getting the best out of the players that are already there. And they're totally flexible. in their approach. This is not just, I've got an philosophy and I'm going to play this way. This is right. We're up against these boys and we're going to play this way to win. And actually within the game, you can see he's changing things as well. So they're tactically flexible. The togetherness is there, which you can add another 10, 15 points over a whole season. In a stadium that only holds 17,000, it's just outrageous what he's doing, really, when you think about it.
I asked him actually last night whether or not he would, what it would mean to him to lead them to Europe and basically write a chapter in the Brentford story that even the greatest manager that Brentford have ever had couldn't manage to write. And, most managers sort of just shy away from that and just don't want to talk about it, right? Because it's like, I don't want to put the pressure on. And he was like, we have to stay focused, one game at a time, next training session, be boring, concentrate on preparation for the next game. He said, but the fans are allowed to. People around the club are allowed to. People that are invested in Brentford should be dreaming, because you're not going to get an opportunity like this very often, are you?
No, they're in a fabulous position when you look at the league table. There are a couple of teams who've hit a bit of form, like Bournemouth, who might yet have something to say about it. But I think what's pleasing as a Brentford fan, all the reasons that Scott has said, the fact it's been such a smooth transition, but also the Diche has been a fortress all season, but they're starting to win games away from home now as well. So they're in a brilliant run of form. Obviously, they go to Macclesfield in the FA Cup on Monday. I think he'll name a strong team, because I think he'll fancy a tilt at the FA Cup as well. So, yeah, it's a great place to be at the moment if you're a Brentford fan.
Obviously, Arsenal is the story, Scott. Did you think that they felt the pressure from the win from Manchester City in midweek? I happened to be at Manchester City on Wednesday night, and it felt a little bit ominous. And actually, talking to Stuart Pearce, at the start of the programme, he sort of said, well, the narrative is that they can feel the breath of Manchester City on their neck, which I think was a line that I used on Wednesday night. So I think he was having a go at me. But it's not really like that. Arsenal, they win tonight, 6 points clear, blah, 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 blah. But actually, I thought the performance from Manchester City was a little bit of an indicator of what we can expect over the next few weeks, because Ruben Dias is back. Mark Guéhi alongside him. It looks like a brick wall has been built in front of a massively brilliant goalkeeper who produces at least one outstanding save every single game. And now Haaland's scoring again.
Yeah, look, yes. What I would say is this the Manchester City of 3-4 years ago, where I believe is, and Crookie will argue with me, the greatest side that English football has seen? No. So Pep's been there, but have a lot of these players, some of them have, but a lot of them haven't been there. So you almost think of Manchester City of the last decade rather than this specific Manchester City. Don't get me wrong, you've mentioned about Ruben Dias, you've mentioned we'll have to see whether Rodri can get to his best. Erling Haaland, if he's scoring goals, he can turn a loss into a draw and a draw into a win. But Arsenal just need to concentrate on themselves. I mean, we're all doing the crookie, aren't we? We're all doing the flip-flopping. 1 minute they beat Leeds, they're absolutely fantastic. And then the next minute, City look like they're really strong, where City went through a really bad run recently. And I don't have unbelievable faith that they will win 10 out of the next 11, Manchester City. So the question is, can Arsenal, now we're getting to the business end of the season, the squeaky bum time. They've been here for 3 years now. This is your moment. As long as they concentrate on themselves, I genuinely still believe that they will go on, can and will go on and win the title. But there's no doubt about it, Sam. The thing between the two ears, at this point now, it is all about that, because they've got all the ingredients to go on and win it.
First, not that I ever want to contradict the 1997 FA Cup winning left-back Scott Minto, but I'm just looking at the predictions for the beginning of the season. Right, who had Manchester City? Right, okay. I haven't swerved away from that. I've never abandoned them. I haven't flipped up. I have just turned around and said, I think Arsenal should win the title, but Manchester City are my pick, and I'm sticking with them.
Who was my pick, by the way, Sam, at the start of the season before ball was kicked?
Liverpool, wasn't it?
No.
Who was it?
It was Arsenal.
Oh, right.
I can't remember.
We'll come back.
Crookie and Troy's.
Crookie can't remember his. He can't even remember the one he picked last week. Anyway, but the big question, I actually think, and I disagree with Scott on this, the question actually is not, are Manchester City the Manchester City of old? And that's the cliche that keeps coming out. They're not the Manchester City.
Do they need to
do they need to be?
Yeah. And also, I think Carlos Tevez, Wayne Rooney, Cristiano Ronaldo have just said, hold my beer when you call that City team the greatest the Premier League's ever seen. But that's a whole different podcast. Do you know one of the issues, and we've spoken about this a lot, it's the fans. You know, I'm sat with a wife last night, obviously a big gooner. She is petrified. You know, it's 0-0. I said, you're going to score. You will score. No, we're not good enough to win the league. We're going to blow it. We're going to bottle it. And that does seem to be the mindset. Whereas you talk to Manchester City fans, because they've been there, they've seen it, they've got the T-shirt, they're quite relaxed about the whole situation. And I do think sometimes that nervousness amongst the fans does spread onto the pitch. We've seen it a couple of times. That game against Manchester United, when they lost, the atmosphere was stony silent at half-time. And just on City, how good a signing has Antoine Semenyo been? A goal and assist again the other night. They've signed a few players from within the Premier League that haven't been able to hit the ground running, haven't been able to make the step up. He has been an absolute revelation. If they do go on and reel in Arsenal, I think that might just be the most key piece of business they've done in a while.
Do you know what? I think it's more detailed than that. I think Semenyo is important because he adds goals that other players are not scoring for them. But I think Gay's signing is absolutely crucial for them, because one of the big issues that they've had over the course of the season is they've scored a lot of goals. They're the top scorers in the Premier League and have been for some while. But keeping clean sheets has been a real issue for them. And actually, as good as Semenyo has been, Gay has been just as good. He made one mistake last night, Wednesday night, and I thought, oh, he might have a little wobble now. No, it didn't. He just reacted straight away and just recalibrated and got back to where he usually is. It's going to be a fascinating end to the season. I wanted to ask you, Scott, with Crook's comments about the anxiety that is emitted from the stands, does it actually affect the players? Can you feel that on the pitch?
Yeah, you can. And I said a few weeks ago that the only way that Arsenal don't win this title is because of the fans. You know, we saw in that Manchester United game where they absolutely unnerved them. And I get it. It's been 22 years since they've won the Premier League title. You know, the last 3 years, they thought they were going to get there. But absolutely, and people turn around and say, well, you're on this amount of money and you should be able to handle it. You're professional elite footballers. And I get that, but they're still human beings. There's nothing like if you make a bad pass when you're 1-0 down, you know, the whole crowd booing and jumping down your throats versus cheering and saying, come on. And you know, under Arteta, the Arsenal fans have been very good, but it does feel that they're getting so nervous because they're so close that those nerves emit to the players. And yes, it does affect them. Look, we said that about them after the Manchester United game. City were 5-10 minutes away from losing at Anfield and the gap would have been massive. Suddenly, bang, bang. And Arsenal have dropped points, and now it's the Premier League race is back on. This is, and what should be, the Premier League being all about. It absolutely fight to the very end. And I think it's absolutely brilliant that City are back. City, they will go on a winning run. I don't think they'll be as capable as they are. So then it's down to Arsenal. And if Arsenal hold firm, they will win the title.
Yep. Well, let's see what happens. It's exciting. Title race, and of course we'll have it all covered here. The North London Derby is the next assignment for Arsenal, and who are they going to be facing? Because it's Tottenham Hotspur, but who's going to be in the dugout? Because this week one of a number of managers have been sacked, and of course the big stories are Sean Dyche and Thomas Frank. So let's get into it. Two big sackings in the space of a week. I mean, football has gone mad, hasn't it? It really has gone mad. You can't believe that in 2026 we've lost so many managers of big clubs. Maresca, we've lost Amorim, we've lost Thomas Frank, we've lost Sean Dyche. There's probably another 7 that I can't remember right now. Xabi Alonso's gone from Real Madrid, for example. I mean, it is just absolutely crazy. Now, I think both of these two sackings are because of the fact that it is starting to get very tight at the bottom of the table, and the boards are panicking. They're panicking about the possibility of relegation. Tottenham know they need a couple of big wins in order to pull themselves away. Nottingham Forest know that they do too. But in Forest's scenario, I am actually absolutely perplexed that they've decided to move away from someone who you would have thought is your biggest and best bet to keep you up.
Yeah, the irony is if they were looking for a firefighter right now, someone who's going to come in, make the team difficult to beat, grind out the points they need to make sure they stay above the dotted line, Sean Dyche would be a top contender, wouldn't he? But I told you a couple of weeks ago that the murmurings were coming out, that Sean Dyche was under big pressure. The owner wasn't happy with the style of play. He believed that he's built a squad that should be challenging in the top half of the table, not looking over their shoulders towards the bottom three. And obviously that pressure in the end has proved too much. From what I'm told, Marinakis was a very angry man, even during the game against Wolves in midweek. There's whispers that he may have smashed the television monitor again in frustration for the second time. I've heard eyewitness reports of 5 senior players being summoned to Marinakis' box immediately after the game. And then Sean Dyche, I think, had actually left the ground, hadn't he? And then came back to be told that he was being relieved of his duties. So it's a soap opera at Nottingham Forest.
The 5 players going up into the boardroom, that happens pretty much every time Marinakis is there. Yeah, that's not really a new thing. I was in the tunnel when Ange Postecoglou got sacked, and they went up and did exactly the same thing. He does canvass opinion, and I actually spoke to Ryan Yates about it, and I said to him, what was that all about? He went, "Oh, we did it all the time. That's just a normal thing." So I think he's quite heavily involved in talking to the players on a regular basis anyway. But obviously it did have significance. There has been sort of rumours of a fallout with the squad because of the training methods
and the playing style.
But it's Sean Dyche. He's obviously going to try and get you as fit as possible so that you can compete till the end of the season. If you only give him 144 days or something like that, not even that, 114 days, I'm not entirely sure, but it's a very short amount of time. Now, he's got the highest win percentage of any Nottingham Forest manager in their Premier League history. It does seem really strange to have pulled the trigger now, Scott. What's the motivation for you? Is it just blind panic?
Panic. Absolute panic. He's absolutely panicked. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's 114 days. It's 22 points in 18 games. And if that ratio stays the same, I think that they will be okay. Look, you say it's a usual thing, and I'm sure it is a usual thing for the players to go and speak to the owner, but it couldn't have been a usual conversation. So there's no doubt about it. Those 5 players have been negative towards Sean Dyche.
Yeah.
And he's got the sack off the back of it, because if they'd have turned around and said, "No, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, he's great. Just stay with us. We had 35 attempts at goal. We should have won this 4-0 or 4-1. This is down to us. Okay, training's a little bit boring, a little bit this, but we're in a relegation scrap." Then he'd keep his job. So it was may have been a normal thing, but definitely not a normal conversation. And he's got to blame himself, Sam, as well, because it was all rosy last season. Don't forget, beginning of last season, everyone's saying they go down. Look what happened. Nuno's done an unbelievable job. He's brought in Edu. There's a clash between that, and it's absolutely folded since. So he's got no one to blame but himself. I know the Forest fans love him, and rightly so, but he has the ultimate blame here for where the club are right now.
This is a man that has taken Nottingham Forest out of the Championship for the first time in 30 years and brought them back to the Premier League. So he is always going to be cherished as the man that dragged them from oblivion and put them back on the map. The issue here is that his ego has got the better of him over the course of the last 12 months. The idea of snaffling up Edu from Arsenal and trying to sort of create this global empire of players that move between his football clubs. It's been an absolute disaster. They've signed too many players. They've changed the manager too often. He's got personally involved too often. And he is in danger of causing circumstances that take them back into the Championship. And if they go back into the Championship, there's never a guarantee that you'll get straight back again. So it is a real perfect storm at Nottingham Forest, which could end up with relegation. Vitor Pereira is the man that they're going to turn to. And although he had a good spell at the end at Wolverhampton Wanderers of last season, the start of this season was an absolute disaster.
Yeah, it was. And I think they're just banking on the fact that he did come in initially, galvanised the place, got the players playing with a smile on their face and kept them up. But he had players like Matheus Cunha. With respect, there's not a player of that talent in this Nottingham Forest squad, despite the fact they spent an awful lot of money. And you use that word ego. I think a big factor in this is that Nuno Espirito Santo is the West Ham manager, and there's a very real danger that the manager that Marinakis drove out of the football club is ultimately going to get his revenge and keep West Ham in the Premier League and send Nottingham Forest down. And that is the ultimate nightmare scenario if you're Evangelos Marinakis. And Scott says, it goes back to the start of this season. It goes back to last season. But he stormed onto the pitch against Leicester, undermined the manager in full view of everybody, came up with this nonsense excuse that he was actually angry with the medical staff, And I think that's where Nottingham Forest really started to unravel. Now, this should have been a season of celebration. It's been anything but.
Yeah, that was certainly one of the incidents. But I think, even the sort of the hiring of Edu before that as well was a major sort of step in a different direction, because you had Ross Wilson there was doing a good job
A
as
steady pair of hands.
the sporting director beforehand. It's a very sort of political environment at Nottingham Forest, and there is a lot of ego and there's a lot of testosterone flying around from Marinakis as well. One of the things that really irritates me, though, is this idea that the players had a say in the manager leaving, Scott, because you are never going to have the authority to be able to run that dressing room if there's always a route to the chairman.
No. We saw that at Leicester, didn't we?
Yeah, same sort of thing. They go round the back to Kun Vichai, and then the manager's cut out of the equation, and all of a sudden they have the power to remove him. It's happened to Chelsea many times as well, Scott.
So what you're saying, Sam, there is there, and it should be taken out.
Yeah, there shouldn't. If you run a football club, the manager has got to be the one who is in charge of the players.
Absolutely.
I listened to Simon this week, and he was talking about his relationship with playing staff and managers, and he said, I would never allow them to come to my office and talk to me about what was going on at the training ground. The players are never allowed to have an audience with me, because the minute I entertain that is the minute I open the door to some sort of mutiny. But they have to realise that that guy is the boss. So I'll talk to him and he can talk to them. Because if I open a route for them to come into my office, then all of a sudden we're all undermining the manager and we're stripping away his authority.
Yeah, look, I always, on the face of it, you're absolutely spot on. And I've never, ever spoken to a chairman about what I think the manager's like. I didn't think it was my place to ever do that. Any conversations was just, hi, how are you? And nothing more than that. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here. The only thing is if the players, and I hate the players, the manager's lost the players. You play for the club first and foremost. You play for yourself first and foremost, and then you play for the club and the fans. Forget the manager. But the modern day player now, with the ego that they've got, seems to me as if they're not having the tactics and training is bad and the atmosphere is bad, then you're just going to, if you keep on doing the same thing, you're going to keep on getting the same results. So I'm just trying to play devil's advocate. If they carry on going down this route, then maybe Marinakis was kind of told that they're not having the manager. That he should turn around and say, I don't care. He's my man. You listen to what he says, or I'll get rid of you and I'll tell him not to play you. And then we'll see what we're doing. You're playing for the fans. You're playing for the club. But it seems to me now that the modern day player is like, well, I'm not happy with this, and maybe speak to the agent, and then suddenly it becomes like a cancer in the dressing room. I'm not suggesting that with Nottingham Forest here, but I do think if the players aren't having the manager, then you're only going to get the same results going on. When actually the results weren't that bad. But it was down to Marinakis to make a decision, either get rid of the manager or say, right, it's the last time you come up here. He's my man. You listen to him, or you're out of here, not him.
But that's weak leadership. That's weak leadership from the executives at the football club to be able to sit there and go, do you know what? Okay, well, the players are saying that if they don't change, then it's not going to get any better and we could end up going down, so we better sort it out. When actually what you need is to turn around and say, no, hold on a second. Your job is to play football. Your job is to listen to the coaches. We've employed a guy who has kept Everton in the division. We've employed a guy who kept Burnley in the division for longer than he should have done. I think he probably has got a better idea on tactics than you, who've only just been playing football for 2 or 3 years at the top level. Not even that, some of you. So let's just concentrate on you doing your job and let him do his job and his coaches do their job. Otherwise, you find yourself in a situation where once the players get the idea that they can decide whether or not a manager should survive or not, then that reflects itself in performances. And I bring you back now to the other conversation that we're about to have, which is Tottenham Hotspur, where you've got a manager who clearly has done an absolutely fantastic job at Brentford, goes into Tottenham, and it turns into an absolute nightmare. And it can't just be because Thomas Frank isn't ready for a big job. There's got to be more to it than that.
Listen, you're preaching to the converted here. I've been saying it for a while. If I was a Tottenham fan, I would be furious with that group of players. I would be furious with the captain, Christian Romero, seems to have led the revolt against the manager. I'd be furious with Pedro Porro, from what I'm told, has been a real pain in the backside in that dressing room. Same for Jed Spence. Even James Maddison, who's not fit, I'm told, has caused aggravation for Thomas Frank. And this is a group of players whose egos led them to believe that they were too big for this manager recruited from Brentford, conveniently forgetting the fact, yes, they won the Dog and Duck Cup, but they finished 17th in the Premier League last year. So I think they need to have a lot more humility, and they basically cast aside a good guy and a very talented coach. And good luck to whoever comes next, because they're going to have the same issues that Thomas Frank had. And they all seem devoted to Ange Postecoglou still, these players. Well, I tell you what, that interview, I don't think he showed much respect for his former employers, Ange Postecoglou. It was blockbuster stuff. But again, if I was a Tottenham fan, I wouldn't be lauding him from the rooftop. I'd be absolutely raging. He even called them Spursy at one stage.
I thought you'd quite like that interview, bearing in mind he basically backs up your claim.
They were.
He said they weren't a big club. I put my head on the floor. I was like, oh no, I'm never going to hear the end of this now, because I've been telling him Spurs are a big club. Spurs are a big club. They've got £1 billion stadium. They've got loads of revenue coming in. They should be amongst the biggest of big clubs, but they don't spend money like a big club, which is what actually Ange said, by the way. He didn't say they weren't a big club. He said they don't spend like a big club in terms of they don't pay the wages that is required to get the big players in, which I think we all know anyway. But I did think you're going to use that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. You know, I agree with what he said, but very unusual, isn't it, for a former manager to come out and two-foot his ex-club like that. Usually there's all kinds of confidentiality agreements that wouldn't allow him to do so.
Do you know what? I thought that, right? Because there's usually like some sort of clause in your contract which you're not allowed to slag anybody off afterwards. You're not allowed to take the staff that you've got there, all that kind of stuff, right? But he's not the former Tottenham manager anymore, is he? He's the former Nottingham Forest manager. So
and he's the former Tottenham manager.
So I think, I think that because he went to Nottingham Forest so quickly, his sort of clauses in his Tottenham contract are finished because they're not paying him anymore. It's all done and dusted.
Very good.
So maybe if they put him on garden, I don't know this, but I'm just guessing it. If they put you on gardening leave, which is what they tend to do now, they don't pay you a big lump sum. They just sort of pay you until you get another job. That happened, like obviously Graham Potter. That's why I didn't take a job for ages at Chelsea. They keep paying you until you get a new job, and because he got the Nottingham Forest job, it all sort of comes to an end.
Yeah.
So then once he does the Nottingham Forest thing, he's got life to think about Tottenham.
Well, listen, it was brilliant material. But as I say, I'm surprised again that the Tottenham fans have just swallowed it up, and they're praising him to high heaven. He's absolutely blasted the football club.
I don't know. I haven't been on social media to look at this, but like when a manager gets sacked, and everybody, all the players, they do that sort of picture of them hugging the manager or them walking off with the manager, and they go, "Great man, so sad for you, Gaffer. We let you down," or something like that. How many of those did we get from Tottenham players when Frank left?
Not many, and the ones that have done it are short and not so sweet, shall we say. So it's obvious. You called it very early on that the players were not entertaining Thomas Frank. We saw it on the pitch, didn't we, when Jed Spence and Mickey van der Ven refused to acknowledge his handshake after the back of a home game. But I think it's a really poor look on the players, and they want a proper manager. Tell you what, if you had a proper manager, guys, most of you wouldn't be there because you're not good enough.
The other problem that should be sort of, I think, highlighted, Scott, is that they had so many injured players in that squad. And look, everyone will say, "Oh, Thomas Frank's overtraining them." It's not true. It was the same last year. There is a real problem here with Tottenham and injuries. They had loads last year. They had loads this year. What is the reasoning behind that? And was that taken into consideration?
Well, clearly not. What's the reason behind it? I don't know, because Ange, you can say with his style of play, there's a reason for it. And especially if you're playing in the back four with that high line, you're sprinting backwards all the time. But then Thomas Frank's a different style. So I honestly do not know. The sports science have to sort this out. And if those players were fit, then I don't believe that Thomas Frank, that Spurs would be down there and Thomas Frank would still be in a job. But, I can't sympathise too much because that's what happens in the Premier League. And now because it's such a fast pace. But going back to, and you can put the two together in terms of Forest and Spurs, I couldn't agree more. It's weak leadership. I couldn't agree more. It's player power gone mad. But this is down to the owners to make sure that they tell the players and put them in their place. And clearly that's not happening. It's one thing for Marinakis to listen to the Forest players, and that happens a lot. And You know, he should have. He's a strong man. He's not a weak leader. He should be going back to them and say, well, okay, I've listened to you. Now get yourself back home, get to sleep, work hard, because he's my man, and you're going to stay up this year. And if you don't, I'll find a way to get rid of you, or, you know, whatever as a consequence. And with Spurs, it is a big club. I mean, Ange knew what he was doing. He didn't obviously know Thomas Frank was going to get sacked, but he knew what he was doing by agreeing to go on anyway. So clearly he wanted to stick the knife in himself. And he's entitled to do what he wants to do. The NDA is finished. But the timing of it for him couldn't have been even better, with Thomas Frank getting the sack himself. And those Spurs players absolutely need to take a look at themselves. And I always say, when it comes to the Spurs, when it comes to players, it's about recruitment. And recruitment is not good enough. You know, the wages are not high enough. They're not buying the good enough player. Are they serious in buying those type of players? It's difficult when you're competing with Man City and Liverpool and Arsenal. It's very, very difficult. But you need to find a way to get some signings over the line. And if you have to offer someone on big money or long contracts in the way that Chelsea have nicked players off other clubs, I'm thinking of Mudryk in particular, find a way to do it.
Also, you have to be cleverer with your recruitment. You know, Aston Villa stay in their lane to a large extent. You know they can't compete with the likes of Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, even Manchester United in terms of attracting the top names and paying the big wages. So they find a way to recruit sensibly and to kick on. Tottenham have not managed to do that. They're going after unrealistic targets. They didn't even need to pick up the phone to Anton Semenyo. They could have called me and I could have said, guys, you're wasting your time here. He's not coming to Tottenham. So, you know, it's a waste of a call. Maybe it's just to appease the fans. Look, we really tried to sign this guy, but he was always going to go to a bigger club. But just on what you said there about weak leadership, right? Daniel Levy was basically hounded out of the football club by the fans, and they were all telling us, you know, this is new ownership, a bright new future. They're going to suddenly start spending hundreds of millions of pounds in the transfer market. That was never going to happen because it is the same ownership. And I'd like to make a bet with you that if Daniel Levy was still in situ, this situation with Thomas Frank would not have been allowed to go on as long as it had. I think Daniel Levy would have pulled the trigger much earlier. I think he would have come down a bit tougher in the dressing room as well. The chief executive seems a pleasant fella. He was wandering around the press room before the last game I was at. But is he cutthroat enough? Johan Langer, as sporting director, did his signing stand up to scrutiny? From what I'm told,
he doesn't do the signing.
From what I'm told, these guys wanted to keep Thomas Frank in position a bit longer. And despite what we're being briefed by Spurs, it was the Lewis family who decided, you know what, enough is enough.
It was the son-in-law of Joe Lewis, Nick Boucher, is that right? Who's got a huge role now in terms of the...
But what does it tell you about the other two guys that they were willing to let this situation, which was clearly untenable, continue?
Well, there is a power vacuum at the top of Tottenham Hotspur, which I think has been filled by Nick Boucher. I think that's his name. And the issue here is that Paratici obviously was signing all the players. Johan Langer is supposed to be the sporting director. He doesn't sign the players. There's some
Paratici didn't want to hire Thomas Frank.
Paratici is the guy who was in charge of all of the recruitment in terms of getting players in, and he stayed for the last window before going off to Fiorentina. Even he's had a dig in his interview about, you know, Fiorentina having a proper approach to signing players and building the club going forward and stuff like that. You know, we saw actually that Richarlison reposted one of those clips that Ange put out criticising the club, talking about lack of ambition, dressing room, blah, blah, blah. And he retweeted that, Richarlison. Cheers, fella. In another act of self-sabotage. So clearly there is a problem in terms of the way that Tottenham Hotspur is being run. You can't ignore all of that smoke. There has to be fire somewhere. So someone's got to come in and get hold of it. The issue is they now need a new manager. Who on earth is going to take this job? Because whereas we know already Victor Pereira is going to be the Nottingham Forest boss till the end of the season at least. I think it's an 18-month contract, but he'll be to the end of the season until they convince Marco Silva to go there. What's happening at Tottenham Hotspur?
Well, they want a new man in place by Monday. I mean, again, I always find it baffling when a team are struggling for form. I know they've not got a game this weekend because they got knocked out of the FA Cup. But to give the players 5 days off on the back of losing at home to Newcastle, I think optically is a terrible look. My understanding is that some of the players had already boarded planes to go and get a bit of winter sunshine when they heard the news that the manager had been fired. They weren't actually told before it became public knowledge. So again, that isn't a great look for the football club. But in terms of a replacement, Roberto De Zerbi, I think, has been sounded out from what we're told by sources close to him. He would prefer a sabbatical, having just left Marseille, and will take his time and choose his next club in the summer. Mauricio Pochettino, I think, is the dream ticket. He's the one they really want, but he's committed to the USA at least until after the World Cup. In terms of an interim, Johnny Heitinger has stayed on the staff, but he didn't exactly pull up any trees at Ajax, did he? Ryan Mason is available. He was a flop at West Bromwich Albion. I think that'd be really underwhelming for Spurs fans if he comes in for a third spell in caretaker charge, despite his links to the club. Harry Redknapp, I think he's more likely to be cheering on the jukebox man at Cheltenham than he is to be returning to dugout at Spurs. Robbie Keane would take it, but not short term. He would want a longer commitment. So they've got themselves in a bit of a mess, Spurs. And by the way,
anybody else?
Well, there's no excuse.
The answer is you don't know.
Because we all knew that Tottenham were going to fire Thomas Frank.
Yeah.
It was a question of when and not if. I said that before the Borussia Dortmund game. So if we knew that, they should have known that, and they should have had a plan in place. They could have had Michael Carrick under different circumstances.
But they haven't. We'll see what happens. North London Derby is the next one for Tottenham Hotspur, and whoever happens to be the manager, might be Crook, might be me, might be Scott. I don't know. Could be anyone.
I'd love to see Crookie take over as caretaker for 12 matches.
Me versus Christian Romero. That'd be box office.
Oh dear. Do you know what? I did speak to Glenn Hoddle. I said to him, you should do it for till the end of the season. Very, very good football brain. He probably need, some younger coaches around him who sort of, to put on some of the sessions of that. But in terms of explaining football to footballers, there isn't anybody much better than that. But maybe that time has passed. I don't know.
Sam, just on that, and honestly, I'm very much trying to look forward rather than look back. But this is, I think Poch would be the ideal one, and he's obviously not going to come now. This is the 12-game season now. What's the most important thing that anybody coming in has to do is get the fans back on side, because that home form has been shocking all season. And they're desperate. I was there on Tuesday. They're desperate to get behind their side, but they haven't seen enough. But the moment things don't go well, it was toxic in the end. They need to get someone, and it does seem ridiculous. You mentioned Glenn. Glenn was the best coach I played under. He was incredible. And even Harry, he would just take the pressure off. And that's what it's about. These players technically should not be down there. So what's wrong? It's the mental side. If you sort the mental side, I know what Crookie's saying about the optically 5 days away. Sometimes that's just what you need. Get away from it all, reset, and suddenly you come back fresh. I'll talk about the scarring of West Ham that they've had of previous time up until the last few weeks. That's where Spurs are right now. If you get a complete reset, 5 days away, someone who's a fan's favourite coming in for 12 matches, then suddenly everyone would feel they're back in it together.
Let's put together a Tottenham dream team, shall we? Glenn Hoddle, Harry Redknapp, Ledley King. They can be joint managers. Let's get Ian Walker back as the goalkeeper coach. Les Ferdinand can coach the strikers.
Actually, do you know what? Les wouldn't be a bad option either. He's a brilliant talker. He's fantastic. He just doesn't want to do it because he's actually a little bit too clever and sharp.
Teddy Sheringham, director of football.
Les is too stylish to be a football manager nowadays. He's just so cool.
He's being facetious now, but I'm telling you, from a player's point of view...
I just ignored him because Michael Carrick's just gone into Manchester United, so we know that the old hero coming back does work every now and again.
Exactly.
They need someone to galvanise them. They need something. They need to win.
In that case, genuinely, the people that we've discussed, if they're not going to get Pochettino, maybe Robbie Keane isn't such a bad shout.
No, Robbie Keane's a reasonable shout because they only need to win 3 games. But Robbie Keane's not going to leave Ferencváros to come and do 6 months. That's the issue that you've got. And Pochettino is not going to be available until the end of July because the USA are going to be in the World Cup till at least the first or second week of July because they'll get to the last 16 because of the way that the tournament works. He's not going to be allowed to leave before. And if he signs a contract before and everyone knows about it, it'll be a disaster. So you kind of need someone who's going to take you through pre-season if that's your plan anyway. So look, there's loads and loads to do there. There's loads to do. Right, okay, we better move on because we've got a lot of FA Cup games just to look through before we get to the end. FA Cup 4th round weekend. Aston Villa against Newcastle, another fascinating match. That's on Saturday evening. Arguably the standout tie of the round, Scott. We're going to this one. 2 sides that will fancy themselves to go deep in the cup, I think.
Yeah, I'm really interested to know Emery's team because obviously they're fighting to stay in. Manchester United, as we well know, are going to finish above them because Crookie tells us that's going to happen.
He went strong in the last round, Scott. So I think he'll go strong. I think he sees this as an opportunity to win a piece of silverware.
Well, Yeah, but to try and win the FA Cup and the Europa League and finish in the top 4 or 5, that's a difficult thing to do. But yeah, I mean, look, if he does, then fair play to him. I just worry about them sort of running out of gas or getting injuries towards the end of it. Whereas for Newcastle, when I was there at Spurs, I thought apart from the 20 minutes at the start of the second half, they were excellent. Newcastle. They weren't that side that was so rubbish away from home. And I think that win will have given them a lot of boost. And we know that Eddie's a little bit under pressure, even though we all think he shouldn't be. So he'll go strong here. So yeah, fascinated to see about this game. It's a great game. It's a proper FA Cup.
His FA Cup record over the course of his career is terrible. Eddie Howe, Bournemouth, the number of times he got knocked out by lower league opponents, I think only once in the last 6 years of Newcastle progressed beyond the 5th round. So there's a bit of a hoodoo for him to overcome in this competition. Good League Cup record, not so good in this one.
Yeah, but they are playing away at Aston Villa, so it's not the same as playing Stevenage at home, is it? Let's be honest.
Cambridge. Cambridge beat them, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Liverpool against Brighton. I think suggested that this is quite a winnable game for Liverpool, but you never know with Brighton, do you? I mean, look, they've got 1 win in 13. Managers under a little bit of pressure there. But they did become the first side to beat Sunderland at the Stadium of Light earlier in the week, which is not an easy thing to do. I suppose it depends on team selection again.
Yeah, it does. But again, you'd have thought that Arne Slot, knowing that there's a lot of question marks about him, will go strong because they're not going to win the Premier League. Obviously, they're still in the Champions League, but they're going to need to pick up form to go deep in that competition. So I think he'll go strong. It was a good win against Sunderland. 1-0 probably flattered the hosts. Liverpool absolutely outplayed them and thoroughly deserved a win, annoyingly, because I thought they dropped points there. But just on Brighton, there's been a bit of noise about Fabian Hertz and his future. They're not playing poorly, They just keep getting done by late goals. A 0-0
They haven't
draw,
got a striker.
No, a 0-0 draw at Villa would have been a brilliant result. And they've conceded an own goal in, the 86th minute. They conceded a late winner against Fulham. They conceded a late equaliser at home to Everton, which again would have been a great victory. So it's that lack of firepower. And I'll go back to what I've said for a few weeks now. They've not replaced João Pedro, and that is a big problem with their recruitment.
Yeah, and that is an issue. Fabian Hurst being PR'd within the inch of his life, by the way, because there was an article in one of the papers this week that told us that it wasn't that he was under pressure. It was that if Brighton didn't step up and give him the players that he needed in the summer, and he might decide to walk away. I mean, he won 1 game in 13. I think you're under a little bit of pressure, actually, to be honest with you. He needs to improve that team. Needs to find a way of getting goals out of that team, however that may come about. Scott, thank you very much. We're back together on Monday morning to review all of the weekend's footballing action and look ahead to a massive week for Newcastle in the Champions League and for Crystal Palace, who are off to Bosnia next week in the Europa Conference League. Remember, talkSPORT is the place to be if you want to listen to all of the best games from the FA Cup, starting with Hull versus Chelsea tonight. I'll be there, and on Saturday, Aston Villa against Newcastle is also live on talkSPORT. We're all looking forward to what should be a massive weekend in the FA Cup. We'll see you next week.